Well, I anticipated that it would be the case at the beginning of my last subscriber special on Breath of the Wild in May, but here it is, fashionably late, my 25,000 subscriber special. I don't actually start production on these videos until I've hit the subscriber milestones because I feel like it would be kinda cocky to do so. I mean, what if people just stop subscribing? What if people just decide they don't like me overnight? It'd be like if 25,000 of my ex-girlfriend were subscribed. Aww. Basically, these videos are always going to be a bit late. Sorry. If you haven't seen my aforementioned 10k subscriber special, then first of all, why not? It's literally one of my favourite videos I've made so far, but it also gives an explanation as to what the deal is with these subscriber specials. At every major subscriber milestone leading up to 100k, that being 10k, 25k, 50k and 75k, I'm going to make a full-length video on one of the only 4 games that I've ever personally rated as a 10 out of 10, yada yada yada, you've probably heard it before. Breath of the Wild was one of them. And if you have basic observational comprehension even slightly above that of the average YouTube commenter, then you've probably figured out that the second of these games that has reached 10 out of 10 on the bread scale is Rayman Legends. Funnily enough, on the subject of comments, I actually got a comment on that last subscriber special video predicting that the next 10 out of 10 game discussed would be Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Close, my friend. I've mentioned before in a previous video that I played both of these games at around the same time and thought very highly of them. I hold Tropical Freeze in very high regard. It's close to a 10 for me, but Rayman Legends does just edge it out for a few reasons that I'll discuss later on in the video. I don't want to say that Rayman Legends is underrated because I feel like everyone who's played it knows how good it is, but I do feel it's massively overlooked. Obviously, you have a good idea of how good I think it is. It's amazing, but I wonder why I don't hear people talking about it so much. Maybe it was overshadowed by Tropical Freeze for a lot of people, considering it released just 6 or so months after. Maybe I'm alone in thinking it's as good as I do. Either way, I really want to draw more attention to it because I think it deserves it, and not enough people have had the pleasure of experiencing this absolute masterpiece. And I don't say that lightly. I think this game is a masterpiece. Of the 4 that I'm going to talk about across this subscriber special series, I think this one is the least flawed. I can think of maybe one thing about it that most people generally dislike, and even then, didn't really bother me that much. So, for some quick background, Rayman Legends came out in August of 2013, was developed and published by Ubisoft, and is the direct sequel to 2011's Rayman Origins. But now comes the delicious Fanta Fruit twist, because like half of Rayman Origins is just in Legends. 40 whole levels from Origins are just in the game on top of the original Rayman Legends content, which is enough to make up a full-scale game by itself. The game doesn't cost more because of this. It's always sold at completely ordinary retail price. The extra content from the previous game is just there. Imagine if you bought Super Mario Odyssey and half of Super Mario Galaxy was just in it for free. Like, imagine if a new Star Wars movie came out and they were like, yeah, we're putting like 80% of the concepts and themes from the old movies into this one. Okay, just imagine the first one. The best thing I can think to compare it to is honestly Generation 2 of Pokemon, like how after clearing Johto, you just get to play through almost the whole map of the original games after as well. It makes Rayman Legends an incredible deal as far as value for money is concerned. But that content to cost ratio would mean nothing if the gameplay of Rayman Legends itself were not super grotesquely, disgustingly lit. And thankfully the gameplay is in fact super grotesque. It's really good. Yeah, it's lit. Rayman himself just feels amazing to play as. His physics are spot on. Jump height, run speed and traction are all just right. One of the few minute details that makes Rayman Legends better than Tropical Freeze in my opinion is the sense of control. Tropical Freeze controls very well in its own right, but I do find DK's physics to feel just slightly more unintuitive than Rayman's. He's quite slippery, so it's often hard to gauge just how much he's going to keep sliding after a boost of momentum, and then you combine this with the roll mechanic, which is exactly that. The roll mechanic is great and really fun to play around with once you get used to it, but it takes a while to figure out what you can do out of it, i.e. jumping, how long you need to be rolling before you can do it, and of course, as I say, what the consequences of that momentum will be. Sometimes it's hard to tell what you can and can't do in Tropical Freeze, and it leads to the game occasionally feeling a bit unresponsive. Rayman doesn't really have this problem at all in my opinion. Everything he he can and can't do feels intuitive and makes sense. It's amazing how much of the game you just get, considering how little tutorial there is. The game constantly guides you and puts you into situations where you have to do something and you'll find yourself just doing it automatically without even being directly told what to do or how you had to do it. In the cases where it does directly tell you what to do, it's just a simple bit of text showing the controls needed as you actually have to do it, perfectly unintrusive. Rayman has this excellent and very conceivable sense of forward momentum, the way you can pick up speed and maintain it throughout the level, and the way that you can immediately stop it with a ground pound feel very natural and predictable. You know how sometimes in Sonic games they have you do this shuttle loop thing, where you run upside down on like a big circle or something? Do you ever kind of like lose track of which direction you're supposed to be holding on the control stick and either awkwardly lose all of your momentum and have to pick it back up again, or worse, just fall and die? Rayman Legends puts you in similar situations quite a lot, where you'll have to run up a wall or something, and I've never had that same problem in this game. One, because these scenarios I think are generally better designed, with you often being encouraged to jump out of them, but also because the game has consistently done such a good job at drawing your eye to the next key point and subconsciously making you preserve your momentum. The level design is so subtle and nuanced in the way that it keeps you moving without even making you think too much about how you're going to get to where you need to go, and thus you never get lost in overthinking the controls. In the best way possible, it doesn't feel like I'm controlling the game, it feels like the game is controlling me, like it's inside my head. What's that, game? You want me to kill the viewer? Well, I suppose there's nothing that can be done for it. You know, the Breath of the Wild video was a really great vehicle to talk about the power of stories and to get a bit personal, and I think this is something I want to kind of carry over to all of the subscriber specials to sort of distinguish them. In a similar way, I think Rayman Legends is an excellent excuse to talk about art and some of my personal experiences with the very abstract concept. It shouldn't take too much looking at Rayman Legends to ascertain that this game is pretty visually stunning. The pop-up book style isn't just a treat for the eyes, but it makes it that much cooler when you fly into the background and continue the level that way, Donkey Kong Country Returns style. There's consistently so much going on in the game's background and foreground, it's so gorgeous and vibrant. It really makes you feel like you're only playing through a single layer of the world's sexiest pop-up book. And trust me, I am a connoisseur. There are some very sexy pop-up books out there. I've talked a few times before about the brief time that I spent on a master's degree for game design and theory. Sadly, I had to leave that course after a couple of months because we couldn't afford it anymore, especially since I was having to make a 3-hour journey there and back on public transport every week to make my lectures. This was the closest university that did the course I wanted. But another reason that I dropped out is that this course, being game design and theory, was quite broad, and thus it brought together a whole bunch of people from different specializations: artists, programmers, musicians, sound designers, and so on. I was one of 3 lowly writers in the group. So when it came to the practical group projects that made up way more of the course than I was led to believe, I felt pretty useless and pretty out of my depth. The course was game design and theory, but I felt it wound up being like 25% theory, and I wasn't expecting to have to learn how to program or to use Photoshop. I don't have any passion for any of that stuff, you know? This was what I told my lecturer Mario when I was leaving. That's not a joke, that was actually his name. I love learning about game design, and I spent a lot of my childhood with my #1 goal in life being to make a game one day. It's since waned on my list of priorities somewhat, but it is something I always think about, and it would probably be on my bucket list if I made one. But maybe I don't have what it takes to actually make a game. I'm a writer and an entertainer at heart. Maybe I like the idea of making a game more than the actual process. It had previously been said multiple times throughout the course that jobs as just a writer for games are very rare, and generally if you want to make it in the industry, you need to be able to make yourself useful in multiple ways. So I was lamenting to Mario that despite growing up and wanting to be a game designer, I was probably never going to make a game. As a writer, I guess I'm gonna have to find some way to write or talk about games that I enjoy and that I can be passionate about. So Mario said to me, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, "Hey man, Roger Ebert never made a movie, and he's like the most respected movie critic of all time." And what he said here was totally appropriate and 1000% true, but after officially going through all the paperwork to leave the course with him, I remember I stood outside his office in the corridor for a few moments, and I remember thinking to myself, Roger fucking Ebert. Is that what I am now? Like, am I a fucking critic? Jesus. I started thinking about the YouTube channel, which I had been doing for just under a year about this time. I left the course around the time my Pokemon Sword and Shield video came out. I was thinking, when the fuck did this happen? When did I fucking Doctor Who regenerate into a critic? Now, don't get me wrong, there is literally nothing wrong with being a critic, but it's just not me. You know, like, I'm supposed to make stuff. I did a creative writing degree and then a game design degree. And after Mario said this, I kind of couldn't help but feel disappointed in myself. Like, here I am, not really making stuff. I talk about games, I get to make dumb jokes and get quote-unquote creative with the way I talk about them, but it's still just talking about things that other people have made. This is why if I didn't do the Fudge's thesis videos, I would probably go crazy. Well, more crazy. Because those are where I get to be really creative and fun and off the wall and not just be like, here is my opinion, here is a joke. So why am I telling you all this? Well, it's because when I look at a game, when I look at a piece of art like Rayman Legends, it reminds me that actually, yeah, I definitely want to make a game one day. Certainly not under the circumstances I was under before. The key thing is that I want to be able to take it at my own pace, but I truly think this game is an inspiring piece of art, and I return to it. Sometimes I even just watch gameplay of it online for inspiration whenever I feel my creative spark starting to fade. I'll talk more eloquently in just a bit about what makes it such an inspiring piece of art to me, but I use it as a reminder to not get complacent. As of right now, I am happy doing what I do. Really, I am. I maintain that I'm really not trying to be a critic as much as I'm trying to be an entertainer, but I'm in a better spot in what I'm doing with my life than I have been in years. But it's creative, imaginative, off-the-wall, beautiful shit like Rayman Legends that reminds me that I'm not going to be content talking about things that other people have made forever, and that's a good thing. I need something like that to keep lighting that fire under my ass and remind me that I want to make things like this. I don't want to just talk about them. Fact of the matter is, I'm probably not going to do this YouTube thing forever. If I do, then I'm certainly not always going to do it in the same way. I used to really care about getting better at guitar. I used to practice almost every day, but ever since I started this channel back at the beginning of 2019, I've found almost all of my creative energy kind of sapped by thinking about and making videos, and I just don't have the time or energy to be practicing anymore, and I want to get back to it someday. So I guess all this talk begs the question, if it's creative fulfillment you're looking for, isn't YouTube art? And that's kind of a big question. My answer would be yes, but with the kind of content that the algorithm generally pushes to the top, we're kind of the macaroni and glue of the art world. Oh yeah, that's really great. Well, we'll put it right up in the fridge. So yes, clearly I think very highly of Rayman Legends. But okay, there's a lot of games out there with good gameplay and visuals. The thing is, where Rayman Legends takes it a step further is something I've talked about briefly in my video on platformers about a year ago. Wait, a year ago? Fuck my life. Lots of platformers, more often 3D than 2D, but lots of platformers in a general sense get these crazy ideas. They have all these cool ideas for things they could make the player do, and a lot of them suck, because a lot of them are nothing to do with platforming. Vehicle sections, underwater sections, flying through hoop sections, escort this blind fucking Scottish goat scientist whilst he walks the most roundabout path possible around a bunch of giant fucking rock monsters sections. Rayman Legends and by extension Rayman Origins have a lot of crazy, unique ideas, but they always relate them to the core gameplay of 2D platforming. There's a few very minor instances where they don't, and even when that's the case, it's so harmless. Are the Murphy levels as fun as the ordinary levels? No, but maybe I'm biased because I originally played the Wii U version. I never found them to be particularly bad. For people unaware, the Murphy levels are levels in which you play as this little vegetable called Murphy, and you basically use the touchscreen to clear a path for Rayman, dragging platforms and tickling enemies to distract them so he can pass. Rayman Legends was originally designed as a Wii U exclusive, which is why the Murphy levels used the gamepad and touchscreen. I have no idea how the later PlayStation and Xbox versions handle it, but I can imagine it's not as fun, though I think these levels serve up some pretty harmless variety. They're pretty cool in a lot of ways. There's a lot of neat ideas going on here that I think are pretty well executed. One of the game's later levels, called Shields Up and Down, is a great example of this. On top of being a Murphy level, it's also about shields, and that concept gets fleshed out and toyed with a lot. You use these shields to protect Rayman from raining fireballs, then you use them as platforms, and then you have to use them to protect him from rising fireballs as well. Consequently, when Rayman Rayman goes underwater, it's dope. He controls super well, and the underwater mechanics are often blended in with other things. One of the game's worlds, 20,000 Lums Under the Sea, is all about underwater mechanics and simultaneously all about stealth. When you hear this, you probably think about setting yourself on fire, but it's actually great. The mechanics are very well developed and fleshed out. They feel natural. There's no intrusive air meter making you panic, and again, I'm going to go back to artfulness. These levels tell stories, they develop and have narratives and themes. Watch the first 30 seconds or so of the level The Mysterious Inflatable Island and think about how it changes the mood and creates an atmosphere. But of course, this is all about when Rayman isn't platforming. It should go without saying that when he is, it's bliss. Olympus Maximus is a world in which being chased seems to be one of its motifs. It has numerous levels where you're being chased by a horde of dark creatures. The chase sequence is something that's been done in video games quite a lot, but the way that Rayman Legends blends the chase sequence with platforming is beautiful. It's so adrenaline pumping, and the level design makes it all feel so natural. And of course, we can't talk about blending cool ideas with 2D platforming without talking about the pretty famous music levels. If you've ever heard someone talk about Rayman Legends before, you've probably heard them talk about the music levels. I talked about them before in the aforementioned platformers video, and I don't want to repeat myself too much or sound like a broken record. Just know that whoever's idea this was is a genius. They're so brilliant, blending the level's music with the gameplay, making it so that parts of the song sync up with the actions you've got to take to progress, having enemies move in rhythm with the song. Mariachi Eye of the Tiger. I rest my case. What I don't hear people talk about so much is the 8-bit versions. Oh boy. Now this shit right here is the other reason that Rayman Legends pips Tropical Freeze for me. Tropical Freeze has a lot of cool ideas, and it does consistently relate them to 2D platforming. It handles its unique concepts very well, but it's also very grounded, which is good in a lot of ways because it keeps the game sensible and it reduces the potential for error. When games or any kind of art shoot for the stars, more often than not, one of two things can happen. They become a roaring success, lauded and praised by many, or they do this. In my opinion, the 8-bit music levels of Rayman Legends are where the game's zany and unique ideas reach the stratosphere. They collectively make up one of the most unbelievable, unique, and outright insane experiences I've ever had with a video game. These levels are effectively remixes of the original music levels you played throughout the game, but they all have these insanely challenging gameplay wrinkles thrown into them. This is orchestral chaos. This is 8-bit orchestral chaos. This is Dragon Slayer. This is 8-bit Dragon Slayer. In an ordinary level, hampering the player's vision and messing with the game's visuals would probably be frustrating, but because these are music levels, it totally works in my opinion. The music is your guide to the level. Because your vision is being messed with, you're now having to rely on the music to inform you when to attack or jump or do all manner of things. You're using sound cues. So the game has not only created this super cool level concept in the first place, but much like it does with so many other unique ideas and mechanics, it's fleshing that concept out and exploring it in more detail. Its own concept. These are nail-bitingly hard, yes, and I would understand if people might find them frustrating, but I just think they're genius. I was getting my ass beat by 8-bit orchestral chaos, but I also just couldn't stop grinning to myself the whole time it was happening. And then I got to this one. This is actual unedited gameplay footage, so look forward to that. Stuff like this is almost fourth wall breaking. It's like the game is directly acknowledging that it is in fact a video game. It knows it, you know it, so why not just go crazy and do some shit that only video games can do? It's reminiscent of Psycho Mantis in Metal Gear Solid reading your memory card and forcing you to switch controller ports to beat him. It's not quite insane to that extent, other games have done similar things, but it's brilliant all the same. Truly stretching the medium of video games and playing with what the interactive medium can do. It's for this reason that I have developed my thesis that Rayman Legends is the only game in existence to be a 5-sense experience. Sight and sound should be fairly self-explanatory. Touch is provided by the Wii U's gamepad functionality with the Murphy levels, and while taste and smell may seem harder to justify, I recently purchased the Nintendo Switch version of Rayman Legends. Yes, I tasted the cartridge. It was delicious. So delicious, in fact, that I mistakenly swallowed it shortly after. But not before getting a good whiff of it, and let me tell you, it smelt just as good. As hard as Rayman Legends gets, and it gets very hard, its difficulty is elegantly offset by a very generous checkpoint system, making death feel like such a triviality, and in a good way, because you feel like you're allowed to make mistakes and mess around with the mechanics and learn how things work without getting punished. This is something games like Rayman Legends and Celeste have implemented beautifully to balance their otherwise ball-busting gameplay and level design as opposed to games like Tropical Freeze or 2D Mario. Those games instead utilize lives, which I think is kinda an outdated system, especially in the case of a harder game like Tropical Freeze. It's another very minor point against the game for me. The boss fights are undeniably incredible. To further contribute to the game's narrative undertones, almost all of them are foreshadowed in the levels leading up to them and by the themes of the worlds they're in. They feel like a very natural evolution and conclusion to said worlds. Much like the rest of the game, they exhibit a beautiful difficulty curve, starting to get seriously hard around the fourth boss, and then you get to a Cloud of Darkness, a boss so hard that when I first fought it in my university accommodation on a sweltering summer's day, it made me sweat so much that I felt the need to take my shirt off, only to realise that I had left my curtains wide open, and numerous people outside in the smoking area seemed to be looking in. Let's never discuss this again. I would get a bit more specific about the level design and its genius, but I actually spent quite a significant portion of that platformers video I made a fucking year ago, on my personal favourite level of the game, and I think it still holds up, so if you feel like hearing me get a bit more analytical about a particular level, then I'd recommend giving that a watch. These subscriber specials are supposed to be more personal than anything, so as I said in the previous one, I'm not going to go over everything, just what mattered most to me. And with that in mind, I have one last little anecdote if you'll indulge me. So the first time I ever played Rayman Legends was a few years after its release, I think about 2016 or so. I know that it was around the same time I started my first job. Well, technically. I had always been dreading the idea of having a regular job, but during my gap year between college and university, I decided that if I was to have any hope of ever building up any kind of savings, I would need to just face the music and see how bad it was. So I got a job in a mail sorting office, carting people's mail around a warehouse and making sure it went to the right place. To my shame, I lasted one day. For a variety of reasons, partially because I was in a lot of physical pain at the time, and I wasn't expecting the physical toll the job would take on me, especially since I didn't know I was flat-footed yet, but also because this kind of work just gave me a lot of anxieties and intrusive thoughts. Short answer, it's about autism, which I've mentioned having a few times in previous videos and will talk about at more length sometime in the future. But basically, I was having all these horrible thoughts of, is this the rest of my life? You know, spending 8 hours a day doing something I hate, only to try and desperately find enjoyment out of the other 6 or so hours I'll be awake. The whole time I was thinking these things and falling further and further into the hole, and to prove what a big kid I am, I also couldn't stop thinking about fucking Rayman Legends, specifically one of the treasure chest chase levels that was imported from Origins, because when I first played that level, I just remember thinking to myself, man, video games are fucking dope. It was so fun and silly and jubilant, and when I thought about these levels, and by extension this game, to myself at work, it just added to the mounting pile of reasons that I felt like I absolutely could not stay here. I was thinking to myself, why the fuck am I here sorting someone's mail instead of making something like that? I'm not proud of the fact that I asked the manager to be let go on my first day. In fact, I hate it. I couldn't help but feel guilty over the fact that so many people do these regular jobs and it's just their lives and they just get on with it, but being this weird little broken kid that I am, I couldn't hack it. I'm sure a lot of artists and creative types can probably at least relate to being in a day job and feeling trapped. So I left, disappointing a lot of my family and myself, and I spent the rest of my gap year working very limited hours as a volunteer salesperson at a charity shop. Hating every minute of that too, despite being actually pretty good at it. University was the reprieve I needed to really figure things out and think about what was next. Then, after a while, I finally worked up the courage to start this channel like I discussed in the Breath of the Wild video, and now here we are. I'm actually pretty happy. Not content, though I'm the kind of guy where I don't know what the hell it's going to take for me to be content, but at least for now I'm happy. I make my money from this channel. Provided things keep going well, I should be able to get my own place next year, and I shudder to think what my life would be like if I didn't keep things around me to keep me motivated. I've talked at length in this video about how Rayman Legends was exactly the kind of thing I was able to hold up as this monument to creativity, the brilliantly clear result of the love and passion of its creators, and it made me smile so much and I enjoyed it so much that it served as a great reminder to me that I shouldn't lose sight of my goal to similarly create things that make people smile. So I guess if there's anything I want people to be able to take away from this video, it's that you are responsible for your own happiness, no one else. Obviously, there are far less privileged people out there than you or I with much less control over their circumstances, but I think most people have more control over their lives than they lead themselves to believe. As cheesy as it's gonna sound, if you have a dream or a passion, you need to chase that shit. Chase it like the goddamn treasure chest in Rayman Origins, because that, I think, is the most important way you can achieve true happiness or contentment. Guys, I just turned 23, alright? I have a lot of life experience. I still haven't got there yet. I would still call this the process. I wouldn't call myself a success story or anything, but I know that the process of chasing whatever it is that I'm after has already been so much more fun and so much more fulfilling than the alternative. Skyrim has a 96 on Metacritic. You can do fucking anything. It was hard to know how much to talk about the Rayman Origins content, considering the nature of it. Just know that it's equally brilliant. Some of my favourite levels in Legends came from the Back to Origins levels. The whole worlds of Desert of Didgeridoos and Gourmandland were great fun. And hey, I just want to make it clear that this video is all very much about my personal experience with the game. We all agree that video games are art, right? But I feel like we rarely talk about games as if they're art. We're always striving for some kind of objectivity, but you can only get so objective with all kinds of art because it by nature is subjective. If you were an esteemed art critic or a painter, you could probably get closer than most to objectivity when talking about the Mona Lisa, but at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is what each individual person gets out of that piece of art. Video games and fine art are not exactly the kind of thing you can make a one-to-one comparison about, but I do think we could all stand to stress just a bit less about objectivity when it comes to video games and maybe talk a bit more about the personal experience, about what we got out of it. And hey, if you view life differently to me, if you choose to live your life differently to how I talked about in this video, and if you have a different outlook on art, that's totally fine and even somewhat expected. This is all very much about the personal experience. And with that, I should say thank you so much, as always, to my higher tier patrons: Waldington, Tale of the Toaster, Cousin Boneless, Bryce Stevens, Flashing Fire, Derek Drost, Chris Monk, Good Chicken, Captain L, Michael Craig, Mike Archer, and Cheesy Chip. Hopefully we'll do this again sometime soon for 50,000 subscribers, and the third of 4 games that have achieved my tantalizing 10 out of 10. I'll speak to you all again soon.